For those of you who have seen my Dragonlance Chronicles episodes, at the very beginning I mentioned a bookmark and showed off a bookmark that was really one of my favorites. And so I thought today I would show off another one of my favorite bookmarks. I have a couple. This is also one that I haven't even taken out of the plastic. It is completely still in it, and I use it this way because I don't want it to get damaged or ruined, which I know seems kind of silly. But my mom gave me this one. It has a little quote at the bottom that says, "Shoot for the moon. Even if you miss it, you will land among the stars." And my mom's always been really supportive of me and all the things that I want to do with my life. And so this was given to me maybe back in high school, if not before. So I've had this one for quite a while, and even though I do have a Kindle and I read on that as well, whenever I have a paperback book, this is one of my favorites to grab because my mom gave it to me, and so it makes it very special to me. So yeah, I just thought I would share this one with you as well, since I shared with you the other one that says, "Shh, I'm trying to read." That one is one of my favorites as well. But this one's very special just because my mom got it for me and picked it out specially for me to be a supportive reminder of always striving to do my best. So as we are reading Pawn of Prophecy, I am using this bookmark to keep in place where I'm at. If you guys have any special bookmarks or anything that you have, I would be really interested to see them or hear about them and why they're special to you. I have a couple more, ones that I don't use as often, but ones that I really like and try to keep nice just to look at, or I do use them obviously occasionally. There's no point otherwise. But they're really precious to me. So I'm sure as we continue going forward, eventually you will see those as well. Okay, that was it. Let's go ahead and get into today's class. Welcome back, Fantasy Fiction Fanatics. It's great to see you again, and I hope you're doing well. Today's class is going to be on the next set of chapters for the Belgariad series. Number 1, Pawn of Prophecy, right here. Hopefully you are enjoying it. If you've read it before, hopefully you're enjoying it again. If you're first time reading it, hopefully you are enjoying it the first time and wanting to continue reading more and talking about it more with me. That's going to be chapters 6 through 10. There we go. 6 through 10 is going to be today's class. We are already we're more than halfway through. Let me see. Yeah, so we're more than halfway through by the time you get to chapter 11. So these are pretty quick reads. If you've watched the Dragonlance Chronicles, they took a lot longer to get through. They're much more dense, thicker books. These ones are much quicker read, but not any less good. They're still amazing and have a good story, but you can definitely tell that you can get a lot farther with 5 chapters through the story. But we also have 5 books, so we still have plenty more to come. All right, let's go ahead and start with our recap, as always. We kind of had a lot happen in this set of chapters, and yet not a lot happened in these chapters. Like, when I was setting up the recap in my notes this time, it felt like, oh, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, and I was like, oh, this is going to be a lot of a recap. And then I realized, like, well, a lot of those were just, like, nitpicky details. Like, these are details, not necessarily a summary of what actually happened, but just, like, listing every single thing that happened in the chapters. So there's a lot of things that are important and a lot of things that you pick up on happening, but really if you're going to give a synopsis and a recap and a shortened summary of what happened, it kind of shrinks what your list is, if you get what I mean. But let's go ahead and talk about it. So, Pole, Garion, Wolf, and Dernick all are starting their journey trying to get away from Felder's farm, and they meet 2 new people in the woods, and they're supposed to be friends of Wolf and Pole. We've got that's Silk and Barak is who they meet, and the group decides to travel by wagon and pretend to be wagoneers as a disguise instead of traveling any other way with just horses or under any other kind of circumstances. They think wagoneers are going to be the best disguise. So they head to Durain first. on their search for whoever Wolf is saying, hey, we need to go and find. The person seems to not have traveled that way, though. Once they reach there, they find that no trace of the person in Durain. So they sell the turnips that they had gotten to travel to Durain with as their wagoneers, and then Silk takes Garion to trade this, to sell the turnips and to get new trade for them to carry on to get their disguise continuing. And he kind of teaches Garion about the trade a bit. You kind of learn a little bit, have a bit of a breather between the traveling in that time. And in the process of getting new cargo to pick up, they meet the Murgo Asherak in the merchant's shop. And Garion swears that he recognizes him as the man in black, who he's seen many times at Valder's farm. So he doesn't say anything about Asherak, and they continue on their way to head toward Murgos. And on their way to Murgos, they find that Brill is still following them, as well as some others. They think they saw the Grolim and some of the other Angronarchs go by. So they can tell that they're being followed, and they're trying to get away from Brill, especially Brill, since Brill knows exactly what they look like and who to look out for. So they get to Murgos, and Murgos, they also are like, there's no sign of the person that Wolf is looking for, but unfortunately Brill actually sees them there, and they've been caught, and they have to fight their way to get out of Murgos, as well as they decide to ditch their wagons and just do regular horses and go as quick as they can to Kamar. When they get to Kamar, they travel as quick as they can. They get there, and Pol decides to make their disguise that she is the Duchess of Arat. And so she's very high-handed when she goes in there, and decides that she's going to be the Duchess and everyone else is going to be her attendants, and that will be their new disguise. Unfortunately, when they get there, they do get a sense that, yes, the person they're looking for is there. But at the same time, the king has requested the presence of somebody matching the description of Wolf. So the military shows up at their inn asking about him, and they end up meeting the said Duchess of Arat, and unfortunately their disguise has been seen through. And that is where we end. It is, they officially say, hey, yeah, obviously we're not who we're saying we are, and they are going to have to go meet the king. So, like I said, quite a few things happen, but not in a sense of like overarching. It's a lot of little details that we really see and can pick up on. But overarching wise, we're just doing a lot of traveling through these chapters, just trying to pick up the trace of whoever Wolf is looking for. Okay, so I've got a couple of different things to talk about this time. I feel like we've established enough story that I'd like to get a little bit more deep into it. But let's go ahead and start with story progression. This is very unlike Dragonlance, and the reason I'm comparing it directly to that is since that's the other high fantasy epic adventure type story that we've covered. So for those of you who have read that or seen those videos, you can kind of get a sense of the compare and the contrast for this story. With this story progression compared to Dragonlance, we have a much more simplified timeline. And what I mean by that is we have a lot of traveling in these 5 chapters. But the traveling is very simplified into a small amount of time on the page. So we're not seeing, tons of details of them on the road. We're not seeing tons of details of, several stops that they have. Obviously, if we look at the map, let's go ahead and take a look at the map. Let's look at the map of the start of part 1, since that's a little bit up close one for where they're at. If we look at this map, obviously it's not a huge area because the world is much bigger and this is just one part of it that they're traveling through. But at the same time, they're clearly taking precious, precious time, weeks and weeks of travel, if not months. It doesn't really specify per se, 100% in the story that, oh, hey, it's taking them, 5 weeks or 2 months or whatever else. But they do talk about how precious time has been lost because they've been traveling to these different areas with, no real sense of knowing where they're going, instead of being able to just go right to where they needed to be. And they're traveling by wagons, which they mentioned takes a slower amount of time than if they were just to gallop with horses or to do some other kind of way of traveling. So we can see through the sense of the comments that have been made about traveling that this is still taking them time. I mean, Garion's learning the secret language with the hand signals and stuff over the course of journeying, and he becomes pretty proficient, not 100% right away, but he's definitely learning how to do it, and to when they stop to because they're being followed and they stop on the side of the road, he can already tell some of the movements that Wolf is doing to Pull in order to speak silently between them. So he's learning enough of this language to be, getting a sense of how it works and to understand some things. Without it having to be a long time, that wouldn't happen. I mean, sure, he could be a very quick learner, but you have to have practice, you have to have repetition, you have to keep going at it. So they've obviously been traveling a long ways, and they've been going to 3 different places and having to make stops in between multiple days to get there. So we see that there is a longer period of time happening, and it's just been truncated and shortened to being like, this is, the whole time we don't want to spend talking about just traveling. We're not going to spend pages and pages and pages and chapters of looking at trees and talking about little details. Instead, Eddings has simplified things, talked about the couple of instances that are really important on this journey to, know things, to get a sense that these characters are having things happen to them, and to get us to where our story needs to go in order to progress. So, very simplified timeline, much longer period of time being fit into a shorter amount of chapters with a shorter amount of words, while still getting the details that they've been traveling, the details that are important to, the characters' progression that we need to know to see that things are moving forward and not just, a vacuum space of like, hey, they were here and now they're here. It also gives us a sense of, them being followed, of, meeting Asherak. Like we mentioned in that one place, that was an important detail to note on this journey, without us having to be like, oh, hey, like we're taking another day of traveling and another day of traveling. He doesn't necessarily specify the time, but with these little clues, we can tell, hey, several weeks has passed before they get to where they're going, just from the fact that they are, upset with how much time has passed. Pull complaining about the wagons being too slow, of wanting to be quick, of them ditching the wagons at the end when they have to hurry, and just getting on the horses and plowing through, and still they have to make, stops and things like that. And Pull complains about having to sleep on the floor one too many times. So obviously, this is a lot more time than we personally see in the writing. I mean, it would be a pretty boring story, I would think, if all you do is talk about every single little detail of on the road. Of course, that doesn't mean he couldn't have put more in, and maybe it still would have been good. That doesn't mean that it would automatically be boring to have the traveling. There are other stories that have more traveling in them. But because obviously not a lot happened in those times, he decided to just show the times of them traveling that were important and necessary because something was happening. So yeah, and then he is kind of telling us of the growth that's happening versus showing us. So we've made a couple of comments, as we'll talk about, of like Garion and other characters that make comments of like, hey, this is now how I've progressed to being at this stage, and you didn't really get to see it because, we kind of skipped over a lot of that time. But now you can say, hey, obviously all this time passed and this is where we're at now. For example, the learning of the language. We obviously didn't see it. We knew that Silk was teaching him, but now he's like, oh, hey, I've now progressed enough to being able to tell what Wolf and Pull are talking about in bits and pieces. Or, you know, when they talk about, hey, I'm going to continue learning now that we're continuing going, and mentioning it a couple times. Garion mentions a couple of times the maturity he feels like he's grown into. He's kind of learned more. He's kind of processed more about what's going on around him. He kind of has more of a sense of who Wolf is looking for. Even if he doesn't understand everything that's happening, he can kind of get a sense of what's going on around him and have a bit more of a mature view of things, even if we don't see the progression of how he got there. Eddings at least lets us know, hey, this is how much time has passed because now Garion is like this, or now he's learned this, or, you know, this kind of event has happened, that kind of stuff. So I'd really like to know if you think that it's would be better with more story, more of the traveling, things like that, or if you feel like the progression is smooth and good and you're glad that we're only focusing on the parts that actually matter, the parts that actually happen, versus just traveling. And I mean, technically you could spend that time, Eddings could have spent that time building characters and getting more revealed, but at the same time, he doesn't want us to know so much. So it makes sense that he wouldn't spend time, you know, detailing characters when he wants to keep them a mystery. Let me know what you think. I'd really like to know how you feel about how quick we have progressed through this more dense period of time in a shorter amount of pages. Okay, and now let's go ahead and talk about world building. Of course, with fantasy, world building is a must, and it's very, very important. And so far, to be honest, I know we talked a little bit about setting up the world in the last one, how Eddings has set it up, but we haven't had a lot of like unique world building for this story yet. It could be just, you know, kind of like a historical story at this point. We haven't really seen much magic. We haven't really seen a lot of fantasy elements. We do know it's a world that isn't our own, but we haven't seen anything really unique or really building this world to be something unique and special. But I feel like now in these 5 chapters, we slowly start to get a little bit of a sense of what this world is and some of its unique features. The first thing is the secret Draznian language that Silk teaches Garion. This is something that, yes, I mean, we technically have sign language in our world now. For people who can't hear, you can still communicate and talk. But I think it's interesting that, you know, they have this hand language that is specific from the Draznians, developed it, and it's in order to talk to people without them being overheard. I'm sure there's probably a similar use sometimes that people learn sign language for. So it's not a completely different concept or completely new concept, but it is kind of interesting to have it purpose this way as its main purpose. The whole reason the language was brought up and that most people use it is to communicate silently and to be sneaky, versus, you know, trying to help people who can't hear and need alternate terms of communication forms. So I think that's pretty interesting, and it kind of builds the world and the Draznian people as well, because obviously the Draznians decided they needed to be sneaky enough and have a language that they can communicate without having to have spoken words or to be overheard. Obviously, maybe that means that they're paranoid because they think everyone's spying on them. Maybe everybody is spying on them. Or maybe they're doing things that they really shouldn't be doing and don't want anybody else to know. And knowing Silk, it kind of seems like it could be all three. It could be any of it. So I think that's a very interesting portion that helps us get more of a sense of this world and the people who live in it. We also have learned that there are 5 types of Angrenarchs. We've got the Murgos, the Thuls, the Grolim, the Nadrax, and the Malorians. So we don't know a whole bunch about all of them. We have seen a couple Murgos. We have seen a Grolim. We might have mentioned a Thul. I don't remember if we did or not off the top of my head, but we might have mentioned a Thul once. We haven't really seen any Nadrax or the Malorians, really. Garion hasn't run into them. But we do know, at least for sure, Murgos and Grolums, and possibly Athol. You're welcome to let me know if you remember for sure whether we did or not in these sets of chapters yet. But what's really interesting is also that the details that they each have their own place of living, kind of like the sons did, the Cherik sons, spread around and they made their own places. Obviously, they have, once they were pushed away, Kaltorok and his people were pushed away, they also settled in different areas and became different peoples. But then the Grolums are their priests, and they are all over the place because they obviously are for all of the community of people who worship Kaltorok, and they do the sacrifices. And apparently, according to Barak, they do a lot of sacrificing of their own people to Kaltorok, which leads to the question that Garion asks is, why do people follow a god that sacrifices them? Which is a great question that nobody knows for sure. At least Barak didn't know who he was having that conversation with. But this gives us a chance to see the world and the different peoples in it. So we've known a little bit about kind of the people that would be the good side of the world. And now we're kind of seeing the people that Kaltorok has made and follows Kaltorok, and they're a little bit more building about them and about the Grolums, learning about the priesthood, what kind of god Kaltorok is. Again, it's building a little bit more of this world that makes it unique. We also see different kinds of money. Of course, in our world, different countries have different types of money, and so we're seeing that here, that different peoples have different forms of money. They are worth different amounts, and so Silk has to barter and make sure that it's in the amount that is in the kind of money that is worth the most amount-wise. So again, it's a small little detail, but we're really starting to get pieces that are building this world and making it unique and making it seem like a real place that people live. And last but not least, the Nicean people. We hear a little bit about them and how they take on serpent mannerisms, which to me just made me really want to see a Nicean. I'm like, what does it really mean to have snake mannerisms? That's what I want to know. So maybe we will see one in the future and we'll be able to see exactly what it means to take on snake mannerisms. I'm really trying to picture it in my head. I'm not totally sure what this means, so I'll be really interested when we actually get to meet this kind of person and to see how they are described as acting, how they talk, that kind of stuff. I mean, maybe they really stress their S's. I'm not sure, but it will definitely be interesting to hear and find out. And apparently they killed the Riven King, which is news to us that, there's been any assassinations to any of the kings. But again, that's another piece of history that comes with building this world and making it unique and making it more real to us as a place that all these things are happening. Okay, so that's all I had for world building. Please let me know if there's anything that I missed or you thought was really cool and thought should be added to the thoughts of where we have built this world so far. Now let's go ahead and talk about some of our new characters that are introduced in these chapters. We talked about a lot of the main ones that we've got in the first video, but now we've added some more significant characters in this next set of chapter and more 2 new people who've actually joined the group. So let's go ahead and just talk about them for a couple of minutes, going over what we know, what they've added, that kind of stuff. So the first one is Silk. Silk is a very, very interesting character. He's just as mysterious as Pull or Wolf at this time. Maybe a little bit more solid in the fact that Garion has a little bit more of an interaction with him. Though at first he was terrified of him, at this point he's gotten a little closer with Silk and be able to interact with him more. Goes with him to, sell some of the merchandise, that kind of stuff, learning it from him. So he's got a little bit more of a rapport with Silk, and I feel like that makes him a little bit more of a tangible character in these chapters. So we're not totally sure what his background is, but it definitely seems that Thief is highly likely to be on there. He makes several comments about him being spy-like or thief-like, or being able to steal things from people. So based on that, it seems very likely that he is very good at stealing things, and likely has been a thief for his in a good portion of his life. He's very good at being a haggler and a merchant as well, knows a lot about merchant ways, how to go about getting the best deals, how to sell wares, and the importance of, you know, the market, that kind of stuff. He's a very good haggler, both for selling and buying at the same time. He's very, very sneaky, a very sneaky person, knows a lot about how to be sneaky. And he's pretty mysterious, like I mentioned before, just like Pole and Wolf is. And I'm sorry, I have a doggo who is demanding attention right now. Let's see if she's gonna come up here. And you can see her. Let's see. Oh. Hi guys, this is Wendy. She was barking at me, demanding demanding that she come up here. And then of course she walks to the edge of the bed. And it's like, okay, I don't know if I really want to be up here. Sorry for that interruption. She'll probably come around here again. Here she comes. Hi, Wendy. Sorry, guys. Oh, good girl. We've got a little helper today. Alright. Anyway, as we were talking, Silk is obviously very mysterious. His past is very mysterious as well. So we'll hopefully learn more about him and his background as things continue to go along. The next character we have is Barack. And he is even more unusual than any of the other characters at this point, except for maybe Dernick, because he does not have a lot of background at all. We kind of get the sense that he is the muscle, and possibly that he has some kind of knight background, something like that. We're not really sure, but he does have armor and mail and does not want to take it off at all. So he's a very quiet character, again, very mysterious himself. We're not really sure what's his story is at all, or how he knows Pole or Wolf, just as we don't know how Silk knows Pole or Wolf. But he's definitely a fighter and is there, it seems, to be the muscle. Sorry, Wendy is doing her own little thing right now. Sorry for the distraction. And we just really don't know anything about him at all. We know even less than we know about Silk. So it's kind of interesting, especially since he's such a quiet character. We don't really get a sense of knowing who he is or what he's doing here in this group, other than possibly being, you know, the fighter, the muscle, that kind of stuff. So we're going to learn hopefully more about him and get more of a sense of who he is as a character moving forward. And the last character that I think is important to mention that we see and learn about in this set of chapters is Asherak, the Murgo, who apparently is also the Black Rider. I'm not sure how Garion knows this. It's kind of his instinct again, considering we don't even know how he had a sense of this Black Rider and how he wasn't freaking out about him, but that he felt like that Black Rider was always there to begin with. It's a very interesting just whole deal going on with him and Garion, so he somehow knows that Asherak is that rider that's been checking in on him. And obviously he's an antagonist, he's not a helper. We don't know yet why he hasn't engaged with Garion or anything else. We don't understand what's happening with Asherak, but we do know that now we have a name, we have a face. Well, at least Garion now has a face of who he is, and we got more of a solidity on who this person is and that he's following Garion. We believe, or at least Garion believes that Ashrak is the golem that was following them that they had to hide from. So it's very, very interesting with Ashrak and all that kind of stuff that's going on with him. How he's always known Garion, why he's done nothing about Garion, is more questions. It seems like so far, and even though we're over halfway through this book, all we have is more questions about who people are, why they're doing what they're doing, and where this is going to go and lead from. Whoop. All the doggos are running. It's okay, Wendy. It's okay. Saying hi for the camera? No? Okay. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit now about Garion's treatment and how different characters have been treating him. Because we can get a sense that obviously he's going to be the main person that this conflict revolves around, how he's going to be the important person that's going to do whatever needs to be done between him and Kaltorak. We can already get that sense that he is going to be a major player in this, kind of the main hero. At this point we have quite a few main characters, but he's going to be the hero that's important at this time. So it's kind of interesting to see, even though that he is young, he's still 14, exactly how he's been treated, especially since going on this journey and him having to mature, that kind of stuff. So let's start with Aunt Pole. I feel like Aunt Pole and Garion's relationship is really important because she is the one that has raised him, and she has the sense of being closest to him. And she won't tell him anything. He has so many questions. He wants to know the answers to. He wants to understand what's going on. And she is having none of it. None of it. He really gets very frustrated with her because she will not tell him a single dang thing. She treats him very firmly, very strictly, almost harshly in some ways. You guys can argue with me on that choice of it being harsh or not. I do think in general it's very firm, but sometimes I feel like she's a little harsher than she would have to be. Keeps Garion very naive. She's at least that's how I see it, is like she's trying to keep him naive, out of the loop, not knowing anything. She feels that he is, according to her, too young to have to know anything. And so even though he has all these questions and he's a very bright boy, she kind of keeps him in this "you're my little kid, I don't telling you anything, you're too young" kind of attitude toward him. And it's very, very frustrating. And I can tell, as you know, Garion being a young man and he's on this journey, I mean, anybody would want to know what's going on and to feel included and to feel like he could contribute. So I don't feel like Garion's frustration is, you know, totally misplaced. And I think in many ways her motivation for that is just, like I said, to keep him in her mind as her little boy. Because I think even though it sounds like she originally didn't expect to take care of him and didn't necessarily want to take care of him or feel that she would be a good mother figure, at this point, that's what she's become, and she really loves and cares about Garion and wants him to be the little boy that she's always seen him as. Next is Wolf. Wolf, we haven't seen as much interaction in these chapters, I feel like, with Garion than we have previously. Previously, I felt like the last set of chapters we had a pretty good back and forth between them, a pretty good sense of, like, you know, their relationship, how they interacted. But this one, even though Wolf is an important character in these chapters, I don't feel like he is super close with Garion through these chapters. Not a lot of sense of them hanging out together, them talking a lot. But Wolf does trust Garion and his thoughts, opinions, things like that. He instantly trusts him about what he saw with Brill. Doesn't question him, doesn't say, "Hey, are you sure that was Brill you saw?" Or "Hey, maybe we should go double check this," or whatever. he instantly is like, okay, you saw Brill, let's get out of here. Really, doesn't question why he was out by himself, that kind of stuff. So he really trusts Garion. He trusts Garion when he talks about Asherak being the Golem and all of that, something when you'd be like, oh, you're just a kid, you don't really know what you're talking about. But instead, he trusts Garion's instincts and says, hey, if you're saying that you think that this guy could be the Golem and that you have this sense that this Asherak person is more than what he seems, he is like, I'm going to go for it, and I totally get it, and I'm going to believe that you're telling the truth, and I'm going to act upon your observations. So I think that that's really good of Wolf, to really trust him and to act upon him as if he was an adult making adult observations, which he is making adult observations, but as if he was an equal making these observations. Next is Silk. Silk, we have quite a bit of interaction between Garion and him in these chapters, and I feel like it's one of the most mature relationships that we see with Garion, is that Silk is much more of a friend, much more of a person that he can speak on equal terms with. Silk doesn't baby him. Silk tells him more than maybe Pull would like. Much more adult, treats him more as an adult, treats him more as an equal, is teaching him the language, is teaching him about merchants and all that kind of stuff. So it's a much more mature interaction and much more mature, what it seems like, relationship and friendship at this point. I think Silk really likes Garion. And is kind of like Garion's friend, like I said at this point. It's much more than anybody else. Everyone else is more like a superior or somebody he doesn't know very well, or like, family in his mind, but Silk is a little bit more so that he can talk to someone he can share his thoughts and feelings with and to ask questions. Then we have Barak. We have very limited interactions with Barak, other than Garion being completely terrified by him when they first met and running for his life. But Barak seems very nice, seems, overall a very gentle person, other than, obviously he's a warrior and has mail and things like that. But on a personal basis, he seems like a very friendly person. But he kind of treats Garion with kid gloves. And the fact that he is taking Pull's side, and he's like, I'm not going to test Pull, I'm not going to tell you anything, I'm not going to treat you like you're, this important person yet, because Pull might kill me. So he's very much more on the limited interaction with Garion, and more of the cautious interaction with Garion, because he's afraid of Pull. Which is a little too bad for Garion and for any kind of relationship that they might have. They already have a limited interaction, and then for it to be kind of him treating him like a kid or like a distant relative that's like, I'm not getting involved, makes it hard for Garion to have more of a connection with him. And it makes it a little bit harder for us as readers to have a connection with him because we see so little time with Barak. And Durnik is our last character here, and he has, I feel like, even more limited interaction with Garion. In fact, Durnik is not mentioned a whole bunch. I mean, we know that he's there, he does contribute, he is mentioned, so we don't totally forget about him. But it is a much more background, much more of a background character along with Barak, but even much more so considering we knew him from the first 5 chapters than he was in the first 5 chapters. We actually had a little bit more interaction with him, a little bit more knowledge. We still really don't know much about Durnik other than that he's from Father's Farm and that he was the blacksmith. And so the interaction with Durnik is very limited, though Durnik does treat him more, I would say, more adult-like. It is a bit more of a mature thing. It's just that Durnik doesn't know anything, so when Garion asks questions, he can only answer to the best of his ability on what he knows, which is not much. So it depends on what kind of questions Garion asks to whether Durnik can answer or not. What do you guys think of the treatment of Garion? I really feel like Pole stands out the most, and she is very firm and very harsh with him sometimes. And I feel a little bad that all he's doing is trying to be helpful and feels like he's just being kept as a kid in a little box to make sure he doesn't get hurt. And he's supposed to be, as we know, he doesn't know this, but we know that he's supposed to be this mighty person, and all he really wants to do is to know about his family and about his past, and Pole won't give him anything. So let me know down below what you think, how you feel, if you think I've missed anything, if you think Pole isn't really that harsh, or if you understand Pole's feelings, whatever else. I'd love to hear whatever you think about it. And let's move on to talking about Garion in general, because Garion, as we've said, seems to be our important person, the person that's gonna, make the most in this battle with Kaltorak. It's probably gonna be the person that's directly against him based on the prologue and how we've set things up so far. We've given that impression. So let's go ahead and talk about him. He's very smart. He has not been given the best high intelligence type upbringing, but he is very, very smart. And he's slowly figuring things out that he can based on very minimal information. Pole isn't giving him much, Wolf isn't giving him much. He's kind of just been thrown into this journey because Aunt Pole's decided they were going to take him, and the whole thing with Brill kind of forcing everything along. But he just observes and is aware, and can then put together pieces that he knows of and that makes sense to him. He can put those together on his own, for the fact that he can tell that they're looking for something that apparently Wolf can sense and find even without knowing, seeing it or, having any way of tracking it. Which he doesn't understand that part, but he does understand that they are looking for something, and even guesses that it is the orb that has been stolen. It's very interesting that he's jumped to that conclusion. Obviously, we feel as readers that he has probably a good guess, since we do know about the prologue and about how important that orb is, and the other not so subtle hints that we've gotten about who Garion is and who Pole and Wolf are. So it seems likely that his guess is correct, but he must be very, very smart in order to come to that conclusion to begin with. You know what I mean? And he knows that Pole and Wolf are not who they seem anymore. He can obviously tell that these people are not who I've always known them to be. They're much more important people. They can do weird things that I don't understand how they can do, but there's something going on, and he can sense that. And he has figured that out and tried to talk about it with somebody, but nobody will answer. He's very frustrated in these chapters. I wouldn't say the whole time he's been frustrated, but he's frustrated on several accounts, usually because of Aunt Pole. And as we talked about before, that is because she is trying to keep him in the dark when all he wants to do is know what's going on. Which, again, kind of makes sense. I don't think anybody, adult or a kid, or a teen as he is, would not want to understand what's going on. If you're going to be in this middle of these things and can put these pieces together but don't have the rest of the information, anybody would be like, hey, what's going on? I don't understand. I would like some answers to the parts that don't make sense to me. And I'm in this journey and I feel like I need to know so I can be helpful and can continue on with everybody else. So it's not unfair for him to be frustrated. But that is definitely seems to be becoming more of the case continually as he is progressing through the story. His instincts are showing even more throughout these chapters. We see them becoming more prominent and more prominent. He jumps into that interaction, or altercation, with Brill and the men that he's trying to get them to stop them. He instantly picks up that stick and starts thwacking them to the horrification of Aunt Pole. He knows about Ashrak being the Black Rider, however he knows that. He does. He is definitely like, that's who that is. That instinct inside him is like making that connection for him. So we just see, his interaction with his instinct to hide in the shadows when he sees Brill interacting with that other shady character and exchanging money. How he sticks to the shadows, and then how he plays off that shady character that he exchanged monies with, asks him that question. He really plays that off and does his part to be unseen but forgettable. So we really see that there is a sense of maturity in Garion that has not been developed himself, that is just coming naturally, almost like a second self inside him. So yeah, we see that he can tell, that there's secrets everywhere, and he's trying to figure things out on his own as best as he can, and just trying to do his best when everybody else won't tell him a thing. What do you think of Garion as a character, and how do you feel that he has developed? Of course, there's a couple times that has been mentioned that he feels he has become more mature, and there's that one part where he mourns the loss of his his naivete in a way. We don't really see totally him progressing super lot, since we've kind of truncated time, as we talked about before. We don't see tons of these interactions that are causing him to grow. We just see the important ones at this point. So let me know what you think of Garion. Do you have a connection with him? Do you like him? Let me know. I'd really love to hear what you think of him, especially since he is such a big portion of this adventure. Alright, now last but not least, it's time for the Nitty Gritty. And I've got 3 different things for the Nitty Gritty, and the first is a quote. So let me go ahead and quickly get to it. It's on page 103, at least in my copy. And it's one by Silk. That says, this is what he says. "We're living in monumentous times, Garion. The events of 1,000 years and more have all focused on these very days. The world, I'm told, is like that. Centuries pass when nothing happens, and then in a few short years, events of such tremendous importance take place that the world is never the same again." And I feel like that is such an important quote for this story. I feel like it just kind of represents a little bit about this story. It's very moving to me. It was something that that just really struck me and seemed super important and super, I don't want to say emotional, but it just struck a chord with me. Like, wow. I wish that there were times that I could feel like something that amazing was going to happen, and that these were the moments that you were living through those amazing times. Any fantasy story, you feel like, those are the moments that all the craziness happens, and that's where the epic adventure happens. And it seemed very fitting, not only for this story and kind of like a sense of what this story feels like, but just also fantasy in general, of the amazement of being able to experience the times when things are world changing, if you know what I mean. What did you think of that quote? Did that strike you in any way, or was that something that you caught on to, or was it not really as catching to your fancy as it was of mine? I just felt like it really seemed like, wow, really something to hold on to, a really memorable quote. So I just wanted to share it with you and see what you thought about it as well. Next, I wanted to talk about how we know the least about Dernick and Barak. And I talked about a little bit how we don't really see tons of them in these chapters. Like, we know that they're there, but they're not mentioned all that much, and we don't really have much interaction with them. So hopefully we'll get them more developed. Hopefully we'll get to see them a bit more, see how things go, what kind of importance they're going to hold for this story, and how we continue going forward. So don't forget about them, even though we don't have tons of, FaceTime, I guess, with them. Don't have as much interaction, as much development with them. Don't forget about them. They will probably be very important for the fact that they are in this story at all. So just keep them in the back of their mind, see if we can get some more development going on them. And then last but not least, we have a lot of mystery on all the characters, except for Garion. I mean, we know that Garion is left in the dark. But other than that, we still have quite a bit of mystery around all the characters, their backgrounds, how they know each other. Even Dernick, though we know that he's just a simple person, we don't really know anything about him all that much, so we still have... Whoa! Oh, sorry guys, I'm losing my light here. Wendy ran... Well, she went running, and then all of them were barking. I had to get them settled down, and then now she's back in the middle of the camera. So we're going to finish up this episode with Wendy being in the screen, I guess. I hope you don't mind. But yeah, we just have a lot. My ending little comment there was that all the characters have a lot of mystery to them, and we'll still have a lot to learn about all of them, and we will see how that develops. So keep in mind that we still have a lot of uncharted territory. Okay, let's go ahead and see if we can end this class without any more running or crazy things happening from the doggos. Please let me know, as always, any comments, questions, concerns, anything. If you just want to have a discussion about something, go ahead and let me know down below. You can also contact me at Twitter, which is at fantasyfiction1, or you're welcome to contact me on Facebook, or to find anything you want to know about on Facebook. Also, Facebook with at fantasyfiction1. You can contact me on my blog, or if you want to see any other of the things that I post on there, I have recommendations, book reviews, some personal blog posts about me and my love of fantasy, things about, my favorites on books, more different kinds of interactions, some terminology, that kind of stuff. Anything and everything I have on there, which is fantasyfictionfanatics.net. You can also contact me on there or by email. Whatever works best for you. I would love, love, love to have a conversation with you, and I'd also love it if you would ask me for whatever you would like to see in the future on my channel. So, I hope you enjoyed today's class. For the next section, go ahead and read chapters 11 through 15, which for my copy is 138 to page 204. So, yeah. I hope you enjoyed, and I guess I will see you guys next time. Let's say goodbye to Wendy. Let's say goodbye, Wendy. Alright, guys. I'll see you next time. Bye.